Welcome everybody to Next Level Snap. My name is Peaceful, and we got here with me LambySeries, the one and only. How you doing this morning, Lammy?
I'm doing great, right? Tonight is relatively a chill night. It's been a while since we recorded the previous one, but I'm excited to do this episode. Really, really excited to share my thoughts on this.
Yeah. Before we get started today, I just wanted to go ahead and say, if you enjoy this sort of content, make sure you're liking the video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and comment down below what other topics you'd like to see us do. That really helps out Lamby's channel, helps him grow. He's got a lot of great content coming out for you that you don't want to miss. So let's go ahead and get into it. I think this is going to be one that's going to be really impactful for basically everyone who's enjoyed these other videos, because we are going to be diving into optimal play for the new ladder system. As any Snap player knows who is someone who gets infinite every month, we now have an infinite leaderboard, an infinite rank. You have snap points that you got to worry about in order to get a higher rank on the leaderboard. So our topic today is just about what you all can do to play more consistently, to play more effectively, and to rank up on the infinite leaderboard. And what's one of the some of the things we're going to dive into are just understanding what's important, how to be more consistent, how to stay focused and know your matchups and play optimally to get you to that high leaderboard rank. Because we have currently in this video right now the number one player on the leaderboards by quite a large margin, right?
Yeah,
Last I
I
looked.
finished I finished the previous season at number 2 on Asia and number 6 overall. So I would say relatively job well done because my intention was just to get into the top 10 just to test like the system and honestly a lot of it was because I wanted to do this video as well. So have a lot of good feedback for you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. And I did the same thing. I actually hadn't played much ladder the months prior, and then I've spent the last like 3 or 4 weeks really grinding for it. I'm currently sitting at like top 300 this month, so I think we'll have a lot of good advice for you all. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions. The first thing I wanted to go over is what is the biggest difference between having success in Conquest and having success in ranked ladder? So, Lammy, I'll go ahead and let you go first.
So it's quite interesting. I think the most obvious and like actually physically looking difference is that there is no like 10 cubes on ladder, right? So for Conquest, there's this thing called cube management, which I think we covered a little bit before as well. Cube management is basically in Conquest, it's your stack. Like in poker, it's your stack. And like how you use your stack to like beat your opponents and like come out on top and like make sure you have enough cubes so that your snaps matter and stuff like that. That's Conquest. For ladder, there's no such thing. For ladder, it's just effectively many rounds of best of ones. And there's a lot of concealed information, right? For ladder, I think success on ladder, a lot of it, which we'll cover later, has to do with discipline and also surprise factor. When I was playing ladder recently, I realized that in general, there's a lot of situations where I think curiosity is your biggest enemy on ladder a lot of the time. And also at the higher ranks, which I'm currently at, when I was also previously for most of the previous season, players are actually relatively conservative and for good reason as well. Because like when you lose a game at the higher ranks or you retreat, you actually lose more cubes than if you were to retreat or lose at a lower rank. So players are very incentivized to be more conservative at the top.
Interesting. Yeah. One of the things I've noticed a lot, and the thing I think is the biggest difference currently between ladder and conquest, is that surprise factor. So having that element to your deck, but also then paying attention to the people you play against, because once you get into the higher ranks of ladder, you do see a lot more of the same people, and if you're paying attention, you can really learn what their tech cards in their deck, and remember that for the times when you play them later, so you know what to play around, which is actually a pretty big deal, and it can be uh, extremely helpful when you're seeing those people pretty regularly on ladder.
Yep. So for top ladder specifically, I think this one is really gonna apply a lot more specifically to top ladder, like you mentioned, which is I actually had this it's like this is super try hard, but I had this like document whereby when I was grinding a session for like maybe a few hours, right, I would take like actual physical notes of like what my opponent was playing and what tech cards are in their deck. Like I would put like, okay, name, rank, what deck, and I would bracket like the type of like tech they have in that particular deck. Because if it's been working for them, they probably will keep sticking to it, and then they won't change. So if I queue into them again, which is very common at a high ladder, like in the thousands each rank, I don't think that's that common. But like in the top 100, you queue into the same people again and again and again and again. uh, I have this list whereby with all their tech and like deck types. So like I use that as a reference a lot to like maybe snap them early if I'm assuming that they are playing the same deck. And often in time they are playing the same deck, especially if they're winning with it. So it helps. Like it's very like extra effort, but obviously if the goal is to rank up and climb and get that high finish, right? Any additional information is very powerful because like you said, surprise factor is super key. Like if they have like a Shadow King in a deck that doesn't run Shadow King, a Shang-Chi in a deck that normally doesn't run Shang-Chi, right? And you know that they do have it just because of prior experience, it's actually super important because they could be snapping you on that. But the thing is, if you know that they are snapping you on that, it's the same thing, right? You just like can leave in peace or stay in peace if their tech doesn't work for you.
Yep, absolutely. And just one minor note, and then we'll move on to the next question. The stuff we talk about in the last video we did about understanding your opponent's tendencies do apply in ranked once you get to a certain level, because like we just talked about, you will see the same people again and again and again. So if you can learn how they generally snap and how they generally tend to play, it's going to help you a lot. All
Yeah, I
right.
want to add one interesting point, which is one of my friends was telling me because he's not very high up on Infinite, but he's like decently high enough to queue into like the high Infinite players, right? He was like, he was echoing my thoughts about like the high Infinite players are more incentivized to be more conservative, which I agree because there's a lot of downside to randomly losing cubes in the high ranks because you lose a lot more, correct?
Mhm.
So he's saying that like since he's like not there yet in terms of rank, he tends to be very aggressive with his snaps versus the higher rank players because they are generally incentivized to just retreat. So he gets a lot of random free cubes. So this might be a strategy you can sort of apply to like scam a few quick wins from high infinite players without actually seeing their deck type. Not saying that it always works, but like I said, we are just incentivized to not play out games when we are generally not favored.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great advice. And generally for like lower ranks, it's still important to pay attention because there are pocket metas where when I was at like 12, 1500, you did still see not this like the higher rank players, but you still saw players around your rank pretty frequently. So you could get that extra equity that way. All right. So we're going to dive into a little bit of deck choices. So what do you find to be more important on Infinite Ladder right now? Having like a deck that is good into the metagame or something that you're just more comfortable playing with?
So this one is I want to say like the best case scenario is your comfortable deck of choice is also one of the better decks in the game. Like let's just say Loki, for example. Like if that's your in your wheelhouse and that's your thing, that's the best case scenario. Because I feel like over significant and large sample size, you can't deny the fact that the best decks are the best decks for a reason, right? Because they've been winning for multiple people across multiple sessions over multiple games. Like it just works. It's just a winning like strategy slash deck. So ideally, your best deck and your comfort deck is also one of the like more popular decks and good decks in the game. So you win the mirror matches because of experience, familiarity, comfort, and you just beat up on the decks that are like less optimized. But of course, on the flip side, if you are not confident enough with some of the better decks in the game, I would say stick to comfort first. Because at the end of the day, I think Marvel Snap is a game about like firstly it's a cube extraction value game. It's also a information warfare and like knowledge based game, right? It's a card game. So if you know 100% how your deck works and your deck opponent only knows like 60% about how your deck works, you get that extra equity from like understanding things better than them in terms of the matchup. Because like let's say they're playing a popular deck like Loki, you're playing a not so popular deck, but you are very comfortable with your not so popular deck. Even me, like if I don't really know what your deck does, I cannot with good like conscience and confidence like play against you, especially if there's so much concealed information as well. So you with your slightly off meta deck, but you are very confident with it, will know what is in this Loki deck for the most of the time because it's the most popular deck. So you might be able to like sneak out like certain like sneaky wins just because you know how they function and they don't really know how you function. So obviously talking about these kind of stuff, it also means that like your deck might be a lot less popular, which means in general it's less optimal. But like I said, if your less popular, less optimal deck is something that you are very confident with you, there's a good chance that you can climb effectively because your opponents don't really know what to expect.
100% agree. So I have a personal story I can add to this. Like last month, I was doing that thing. I was playing the deck I was comfortable with. I was playing Thanos. I was like, I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna climb, and I was climbing, but very slowly because Thanos is horrible into Loki. So one of the things I did is I went into Conquest for like a few hours and just played Loki, knowing, understanding it's a little different, but I wanted to get comfortable with the play lines of the deck because I knew Loki, but it wasn't like not like I know Thanos and not like I know the decks that I enjoy a lot more. And one of the things that you'll learn is even if you aren't always playing the best deck, you should understand the best deck because if you don't know how to play it optimally, you're not going to know what to play around when your opponent plays it. Because I guarantee you, once you get to the upper like, even like probably the upper like 2 or 3 thousands on Infinite Ladder, and your opponent's playing Loki, they know what they're doing, and they're going to play it optimally, and they're going to play it well, and that's gonna put you at a disadvantage because even if you're not playing Loki as well, you're not going to understand what they're trying to do, and that's just as important. So we're going to dive into some things that we see on ladder. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see from other players on ranked ladder, and how do you think they could correct them?
All right, so this is probably the most important portion of the video for me personally. I think ladder in general. I went into this ladder season attempt with like some like preconceived like ideas, and I wanted to see if they worked. And turns out like I think most of it worked. Which is so basically, um, just to reiterate and reassure you guys again that like what I'm trying to tell you here is very proven by me over like 2 weeks, and also based on like my past like theories and stuff like that. I managed to follow this methodology all the way into top 10 and stay there, and even had a shot at top 1 for a few times. So trust me on this methodology, it's true. So first and most important thing, be a robot. I know it's kind of funny, but be a robot. What does be a robot mean? Be a robot means that like for the most part, right? Ladder is about discipline more than actual like high skill factor. Like I have to be completely frank with you. Like if you can make it into like the top few thousands, right? Like you also can make it into the top few hundreds. It's about the same because the main difference is just your discipline, which is there are a lot of times when someone snaps you on ladder, right? And then you have no idea what they're playing. You have no idea what's going on. You look at your hand, it's not fantastic. But the first thought that comes into your mind is, all right, I'm just gonna see what happens. This thought, I'm gonna see what happens, is what kills 95% of players, like maybe even 99. Because to see what happens is natural human tendencies, right? Curiosity, blah blah blah. But on ladder, the thing is you need to realize that when I say be more like a robot, it just means that just be as logical as you can. If you don't, I've been reiterating this like since like forever in like other topics as well. Like if you don't know why you should stay and you don't see a reason why you can stay and your hand is not even amazing, just leave. Just leave. Like you would be like, oh, I might wanna stay just to see what happens. But this idea of trying to see what happens means you lose an extra cube if you retreat eventually anyway. And over time, one extra cube loss, one extra like cube loss per game over hundreds of games is gonna compound super greatly. And then you realize you're in this state whereby, oh, I just lost. I'm at a deficit after like a few hours of play. Why? Why? Just because I keep staying randomly. Yeah, you shouldn't stay just because you wanted to see what happens. It's a very dangerous ideology that a lot of people fall into. Like a lot of the top players that I play against, and a lot of and myself as well, I would say that we do our very best to not let curiosity get the better of us. Like I got into this habit, or like I kept telling myself that like because it's very human nature, right, to want to see what happens. But I kept telling myself that like, all right, if you don't know why you should stay, if your hand is not the best, just leave, just leave, just leave. And another thing to add on to that is a lot of players, including myself, sometimes it's very difficult to not do this, but you try and win every game. Like it's not something that I'm saying this from a perspective of someone that already can be quite disciplined when it comes to this kind of stuff. And even then I still find it very difficult because generally people don't like to lose. Humans don't like to lose. But the thing is Marvel Snap is really a game about like cutting your losses, right? It's winning big and losing small. It's honestly about winning big and losing small. And like sometimes it's very difficult to just accept that losing small means that like you snap aggressively and then retreat just because you realize that they are not the deck that you expect to see. But like there are very often times on ladder after like 6 hours, 7 hours of grinding, you just feel like you need to try and win this game. You need to try and win that game. You've been like drawing bad hands for 7 games in a row. Your eighth game, you still drew a bad hand, but you suddenly felt like you want to try and win this game. it doesn't make sense, right? Like, just cause you drew 7 bad hands in a row doesn't mean the 8th game you need to win. You doesn't mean that you definitely need to try and win that game, you know. But the thing is, it's very human nature to try and like win after a long losing streak. And I did find it a bit difficult sometimes to get myself out of that as well. But like, you need to constantly remind yourself that like some games are just not meant to be won. And like, I'm just gonna give a random number here, but if you lose 21 cube games in a row from retreating, I don't even think that it's like impossible. I think it's very possible that you draw 20 bad hands in a row. I mean, this is probably like upper limit already, but like, so 20 is a bit much. But let's say you draw 10 bad hands in a row, it's definitely possible. Doesn't mean that your 11th game you need to all in for 8 cubes just to see what happens and hope you win, you know? So I feel like this is easy to tell you guys, but in practice, when you're in the heat of the moment, it's very difficult to catch yourself and say that, okay, I'm probably still meant to lose this game. Let's just retreat and play the next one. Oh, another bad hand. All right, I'm going to retreat again. Oh, another bad hand. I'm going to retreat again. You know, if this happens like 10 times in a row, it's like super difficult to keep telling yourself that you're supposed to retreat. But you are supposed to retreat because it's not, there's no like actual factor that mitigates you from saying, like, makes you like, oh, I'm supposed to play a bad hand. You're not supposed to play a bad hand on ladder. You're supposed to be patient and wait and wait and wait. Wait for those impatient people that play their not so good hands into your good hands, and then you capitalize on them. It's easy to say for me now because I've like experienced it, and I can tell you that it's really very dangerous to just try to win games you're not meant to win. But like, it's really super important. Like, I feel like this is like a bit of hindsight, but like, the more I look at it, right, when I reviewed my previous season, if I actually followed this methodology strictly without fail, which is kind of hard because I'm human anyway, I could definitely be number 1 last season. But because I'm also human, so I make some mistakes, I dropped the number 2 on the Asia ladder and stuff like that. But yeah, my point is that at the end of the day, driving home, super strong point. Don't try to win games that are just not meant to be won, and don't let curiosity like get the better of you, which is, like I said, easy to say, hard to do, but you really gotta do it.
100%. So if you want some proof that this methodology works, I'm sitting right here. So we had actually had a little bit of a conversation after our last one, after the video ended, that we wanted to do this video, and Lammy expressed to me that this was kind of what was going to be his methodology, the very disciplined, take emotion out of it. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to work on it because that's something I struggle with. The taking the emotion out of it, knowing when to leave, playing the odds of what's happening instead of letting my emotion factor in. And I had went from like 3 or 4 thousand to, by the end of last season, I was almost top 1,000. Now this season I'm top 300. It works. It's like you said, it's hard to maintain it over long periods of time. So sometimes you just need to take a break. That's what I've learned. If I'm getting a little frustrated, I just step away for a little bit, go take a walk, go do something else, hop into a stream and hang out with some streamers and just talk to them for a little bit, get my mind clear, and then come back to it. The only thing I wanted to add for this one, and a mistake that I've seen a ton since I've started using this methodology, is not just people staying early for the one to go into 2 cubes, but people who snap and then get into a very unfavorable situation. And uh, I'm trying to think of what to call it, but they don't want to retreat because they feel like they're already in for 2 cubes or for 4 cubes, but they're in a super unfavorable situation. It's totally fine on turn 6 to leave for 4 cubes, knowing that your chances of winning are like completely reliant on your opponent making some huge mistake. That's okay too. It sucks. Don't get me wrong. No one likes leaving for 4 cubes when they snapped and they thought they had a good hand, but sometimes the locations don't pan out, your cards don't play out the way you thought they would, or your opponent just makes a good read and outplays you. That happens as well. And admitting that you got played, that you were outsmarted this game, and leaving for 4 instead of giving them 8 is still a win in my book, because it's going to be so much worse if you stay.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one last thing to this, which I think is a super, super huge like downfall factor for a lot of players, which I actually did catch myself almost reaching this point a few times and I stopped, thank God. But like, if you look at your play session, let's say you did like 3 hours of play, any amount of play, right? 3 hours of play, and you are like getting fatigued, unable to think properly, and then you realize that you're actually at a deficit. If the thought that comes into your head is, I need to cover back my losses, this thought is practically like a gambler's mentality already. Like, if you
Mhm.
feel like you need to cover back what you've lost, you should stop. The moment you think about trying to cover back what you've lost, and you proceed to do what you think you should do to try and cover back your losses, 9 out of 10 times, I assure you, you will drop doubly quickly in the same amount of time. I've seen real life examples of this over my years of grinding ladder. I've experienced it myself as well. And this time I didn't let it happen to myself, but it's a thing, it's a human thing. You really feel like you want to cover your losses, but this ideology, this idea is like the biggest downfall idea of trying to cover back what you tried to, like what you lost, which is, it's not always possible because after 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours of play, you actually are more fatigued. So playing optimally and covering back the loss and the mental pressure of like, all right, I need to get back these 100 SP, 200 SP, whatever, it's gonna like propel you downward. Like it's additional stress that you don't realize that you're putting on yourself. So to reiterate, to add on to what Peaceful said about this idea that we are talking about, which is 3 weeks ago, I told him that we wanted to make this video, and I told him this was the idea that we're gonna do going forward, and I guess we both followed it and we've had sufficient results, right, at different levels. So I think you guys can trust us on this one, and I can safely say that like the biggest downfall when it comes to grinding ladder at the end of everything we've just said is really discipline. Like again, to reiterate, be more like a robot, less emotion, more logical, less curiosity, more just concise play. And once your mind reaches a point whereby it cannot actually play optimally anymore, you gotta notice this as soon as possible and stop.
100% agree. That's it. That's it. Be a robot. It's easier said than done, but it does
Of
make a
course.
huge difference. All right, so we're about to wrap this up. So the last thing I wanted to at least mention is the importance of proper snapping on ladder. I still see a ton of people, even at very high ranks, people who are like ranked 2, 3, 400, who their snapping is just really, really poor. And so I thought it was at least important that we mentioned here that snapping is extremely important for ranking up on ladder. We have 2 videos already that cover this in depth, but Lammy, do you want to give them just a very brief summary of what some pointers that they can use for proper snapping on ladder?
Right, I'm gonna be a bit more specific here to like ladder, because I feel like on ladder, firstly, there's a lot of concealed information, right? You don't really know what's going on, and like you don't really know what your opponent is bringing. Obviously, if you play them a second time, you might have that so-called like spreadsheet that I was talking about that lets you know what they're playing, but without that, you don't really know. So I think the most important like snapping point that carries over from our other videos, which you can check out, is I want to talk about snapping on before you make a game-winning play, because this is the one snapping technique that I think can be very consistent whether you know or don't know what your opponent is playing, right? If you know you have like a game-winning Shang-Chi, game-winning Legion, game-winning whatever Rogue, now it's super important and popular, you snap before you play the card. You put yourself in for 2 cubes because you know you have a definite counter to their play on the board. And if obviously it doesn't pan out, you retreat for 2. It's fine. But to learn how to extract like cubes on ladder, because the thing is like even at the high, especially at the higher ranks, right, you either retreat for 1 passively, or you push a bit of aggression because you see you're in a winning position and trying to get more cubes, because like at the higher ranks, if you keep retreating, also you're technically going to keep losing cubes because you lose more from losing than most other players. So like in order to like eventually still climb, when you're in a good position, capitalize on it. When you're in a bad position, retreat quickly. Don't try and be funny and like curious and find out what's going on. So I feel like at the end of the day, it's okay to lose 2 cube games because you are doing the right thing. Like I think losing 2 cube games because you're just staying for fun is how you end up
Yeah.
losing many games for no reason and losing a lot of cubes. But if you
Mhm.
are in a position where you can make a game-winning play, yeah, then yes, you can snap them, and hopefully it pans out. Like I said, there is so much lack of information on ladder for you to make other kinds of like proper snaps, right? Like let's talk about locational snapping. Like you can't really make a locational snap based on their deck because you don't know what their deck is. But if they played Miss Marvel on turn 4 and you have a rogue in hand, yeah, okay, that's a snap. Whether they know you have the rogue or not, because that's something that you can define as like a game-winning situation. Those are more clear-cut for you. So I think if you follow this very simple snap, like this snap technique is probably the best that you can use on ladder, because it's more consistent, right? Like I said, locational snapping or like player tendency snapping is a bit harder, especially if it's not like the absolute highest ranks. So yeah.
Like Lammy said, people tend to play more conservative at high ladder, so it is also sometimes correct not to snap. If you are pretty sure you're going to win, like if you have a pretty good read that you're going to counter what they're doing and you're going to win on turn 6, a lot of times if you snap there and it's a very like 50-50 situation, they're just going to leave for one, and then you only get one cube. And it's better just to let it play through and get that 2 cubes and get that those extra points. That's something that it took me a little bit of time to get used to, because it's a little bit different than Conquest. Because in Conquest, I feel like you should snap those because you want to punish them for staying when they shouldn't stay. But on ladder, it's just you're not going to see that person again the next round. Take the cubes while you can get them, because like we talked about in question one, people just play a lot more conservatively at the higher ranks. All right, so let's that's all I had for today. Let's go ahead and give them a brief summary, Lamey. Why don't you kind of run through very briefly some key points from this conversation, a key summary for what people should be doing on ladder.
All right, so I'm gonna start this off by our overarching topic is to be good on ladder. Okay, we didn't talk about this previously, but firstly, you gotta be decently proficient at the game, right? Like learn your
Yeah,
matchups, know your deck well. Okay, that one we didn't really talk much about it because like that's a given, right? You gotta be better
yeah.
than other people to climb. Yeah, that's the given. But the one thing that I really want to drive home right now is on ladder. If your goal, okay, if your goal is to see your number, your SP increase, if that's the goal, be a robot. Like be a robot. What be a robot means is don't use emotion to determine your outcomes, right? If you just want to stay to see what happens randomly out of nowhere, if your goal is to climb, that's probably wrong. Um, you still do snap, but there are less factors that you can snap on because there's a lot of concealed information on ladder. But you can follow the same rule of snapping before you make a game-winning play, so you can entice them to stay. That's very important as well. And once again, retreating is like the hallmark of success on ladder as well in many other situations, because there are a lot of times that you don't actually need to see what they have, because if they're snapping you aggressively first, there's a good chance that they already have the good hand. If your hand is not even like half decent, you don't need to know what's going on. Just retreat and play against someone else, right? Because
Mhm.
it's not always that you play against the same person on ladder. It's very rare you play against the same person on ladder outside of the highest ranks. And I think last but not least is I feel like there's a lot of situations where you try to win games that you just cannot win. There are certain situations in a game whereby you are just not meant to win. You are really just not meant to win. And Marvel Snap is a game about cutting losses and maximizing wins. So it could really be like 10 games in a row. You just draw worse hands than your opponent. It's like normal, by the way. Don't think about it as like you have to win a game just because you've been losing so much or retreating so much. There's no such thing. You can be retreating for I've retreated and like not won a single like solid game for like half an hour to 45 minutes straight. It's very normal. Like I just lost for 45 minutes straight, you know. It's very normal. But that's where you cut your losses. And when you are in an upswing, when you're in a situation where you're drawing the better hands, then you capitalize. You snap on your good hands and you see what happens. So ladder's really a grind, but if you grind the right way, you will see incremental gains over time.
Awesome. I think if you take the advice we've given you in this video and just use it without question, like play like a robot, take emotion out of the equation, you will be successful on ladder. I promise you, it's a very successful methodology. It's going to work. All right, Lammy, thank you so much. I always love doing these with you. Remember, if you aren't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these videos. Lammy also has a series with KM Best called 8 Cubes that I have been really enjoying. It's really good stuff. It's really fun. The format's really cool. So make sure you're subscribed, because Lammy's channel's got a lot to offer. Like the video, comment down below what other topics you'd like to see us do. That all helps Lammy out, helps his channel grow. So we appreciate you. And Lammy, I guess I'll catch you next time.
Take care and see you guys soon.